2019 is full of twists and turns and unexpected cycles. We have 3 eclipses to look out for. Saturn K2 conjunction close for months. We have Mars Rahu exact opposition to Saturn K2. We have Jupiter moving back and forth between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Quite a few other things ahead, so check this out. This is going to be a quick overview of 2019 and 8 of the important shifts. I'm also going to do a longer web class that you can register for. One of the main overviews of 2019 is going to show this theme of all these planets in Sagittarius, in particular Saturn and Ketu coming together, then later Jupiter joining, also aspects for Mars, and all of this concentrated energy around Sagittarius, especially with Saturn and Ketu also so close together. It's going to show a sort of destroying of hope on a certain level, where we're finding our illusions shattered around perhaps political figures or leaders, perhaps like popes or spiritual figures. In addition, we could see where people may be perhaps persecuted for their religion or for their more secular beliefs, even where you might have Democrats against Republicans and people in their belief silos, this kind of belief-centric fanaticism silo, perhaps at the disclosure of information and investigations. You know, we see in the U.S. all this stuff coming to a head around our president and these investigations and what appears to be some very serious charges, and how that could polarize and destroy things. Very much shown by Saturn K2 in Sagittarius. In addition, we see some very ominous indicators of the financial system, the financial markets, not just in the US, but all around the world. All kinds of upheaval is possible. In addition, some of the indicators in the middle of the year, particularly when Mars and Rahu join opposite Saturn K2, could show the potential for war, terrorist, some sudden terrorist activity and things like that. There's quite a bit to be looking at. The end of 2019 gets a little better when Jupiter finally goes into Sagittarius. But with that said, I'll be more specific now. So the year begins with a bang on July 5th. We see July 5th and into the 6th, depending on where you are on Earth, we have the first solar eclipse of 2019. Now there's actually 3 solar eclipses in 2019, and you could see right away in January we're starting with this solar eclipse. It's also joined Saturn. Mercury is also not far behind. So we start off with this focus on our inspirations and purpose and what is getting changed and transformed around those things. This is because it's in the sign of Sagittarius. Of course, Saturn joining this eclipse is also bringing a lot of concentrated energy where we're having to face the consequences of our actions. Now again, one of the things about Sagittarius, it's related to justice. It's literally related to like the legal system. So any kind of injustices that you've been a part of or anything like that could really become pressure filled at the beginning of 2019 during this time. Now it's in Purvashada Nakshatra, which is a very devotional nakshatra, but it's also kind of fanatical, and where our loyalties can get a little bit skewed. So that's really an important way to start the year with this solar eclipse in Sagittarius. Now for March 13th to like May the 8th or so, we have Jupiter going back and forth between this Jeshta Mula Gandanta section between Jupiter and Sagittarius. I'm sorry, between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Jupiter goes up, stops, then goes back. So this retrograde cycle starts in early Sagittarius, but then goes back into Scorpio. So this is literally for like 2 months, having Jupiter hovering in less than 1 degree of Scorpio and Sagittarius. This shows, also a time where our sense of purpose and vision, again, things like justice and higher, law and things like that can be compromised. And again, when we look in the mundane structures of our world, we might see issues with like the courts, or again, international relations and diplomacy, and also like religion and things like that getting pressured and undermined. March 23rd, we see Rahu and Ketu move into their respective signs, where they'll be for the next 1.5 years or so. So Ketu moves into Sagittarius and Rahu moves into Gemini. Now this is a very powerful axis for Rahu and Ketu. Rahu does very well in Gemini. I happen to think it's the most enlightened place actually to help us figure out the problem of the nodes. I think Gemini is probably the best sign, and that's also a widely held view in some of the Vedic astrology classics. And that also, of course, puts Ketu in Sagittarius, which is also quite powerful because Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, very focused. So for the next 1.5 years, this Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius, in general, is quite well disposed to help us work through the difficulty of the world we're living in. And again, a lot of the problems and confusion that we've been having the last several years as it relates to a sense of justice and fairness and diplomacy and some of these things that have been really hard to come by lately, especially in our world of, world of politics and all of these things that have been happening, trying to get a clearer picture also on a personal level. Rahu in Gemini really allows us to understand things and look for those higher answers. Ketu in Sagittarius allows us to really drill down into the truth and insist and find good teachings rather than all the bad, confusing teachings that we've been seeing for the last couple years. So from April 10th until October 8th, Saturn and Ketu are in these exact conjunctions within about 2 degrees. You can see it starting right here on April 10th. Then what happens is Ketu and Saturn will track very evenly with each other, because Saturn is about to turn retrograde and he goes up, and then Saturn and Ketu track right along with each other literally from April 10th until October 16th. That's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. 6 months, Ketu and Saturn are moving right together with each other. That hardly ever happens because they usually move in different directions and pass each other like that. They go whoop. But what's happening now is as Ketu is going backwards, Saturn is going like this, and then they're both going like that for about 6 months. So again, this is going to be one of the most transformative and sort of reversing of fortunes, especially around Sagittarius themes that have to do, again, like with a sense of justice and correcting mistakes of the past. Again, you could see certain decisions that you've made or that others have made that have been less than honest, less than truthful, come to the forefront now and really kind of show some heavy consequences. So again, this is very important to understand how this is going to influence your chart and your life. 6 months of Saturn and Ketu going through Sagittarius and how that would affect you is going to be pretty important to know. Then we get into a really, intense configuration in the midst of this Saturn-Ketu kind of dance. You can see right here on June 8th, Saturn is retrograde at 25, Ketu is at about 24, so they're about 1 degree next to each other here. And look, then Mars passes within a couple degrees of Rahu. So from June 8th until June 15th, Mars and Rahu are going to be exactly opposite Saturn and Ketu. And if I go forward one day at a time. Watch the degrees of Mars as it gets closer and closer to Rahu. This is July 11th, July 12th. It's still exact, and it's exactly opposite Saturn. This could be one of the most dangerous times of the year, or that we've seen in a long time. We could see a major kind of, if not terrorist or cataclysmic, war or explosive event, explosive negative event take place from June 8th to June 15th, around that time, for sure, that week. Very explosive. So again, people have a lot of planets in Gemini, myself, or Sagittarius. Again, this whole axis is really important, but everyone has it somewhere. If you're Virgo, it's in your 10th house. If you're Taurus, it's in your 2nd house, which has to do with like family or teeth. If you're Capricorn, it's your 6th house, right? If it's Leo, it's your 11th house, which is your community, your culture. So again, everyone has these configurations somewhere. So you may look into getting one of the short readings that I'm giving to help navigate these tricky placements in 2018, because they're very important, and we're all going to, 2019, because we're all going to be dealing with these in some way. Then on July 2nd, we have the second solar eclipse of the year. The solar eclipse is going to be in Ardra nakshatra. And again, Ardra is quite a transformative nakshatra. It's Lord Shiva. And it's, Rahu is eclipsing the sun and moon in Ardra. Ardra is related to the flood and explosiveness. We've had many natural disasters and man-made disasters happen in Ardra, like 9/11 happened, the planes hit the buildings in Ardra, or actually in Mrigashira, then all the debris started to flood Manhattan when the moon went into Ardra. We've had tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, when the moon was in Ardra. We recently had this flood in Indonesia that just happened on December 23rd with the full moon in Ardra. So this is a solar eclipse in Ardra, July 2nd, 2019. Very powerful and transformative. Of course, it's also the sign of Gemini, which is where, Gemini is where our ideas and the truth and the facts assert themselves and blow up the conventional kind of landed authority. So you often see Gemini is the kind of thing where, again, like information and data tends to bring down the kind of pious, preachy, even sort of government figures. And so again, this is going to be a tough year for those leaders and people in power who have not been honest. That's definitely something that can be said right off the bat, because of all this pressure in Sagittarius, which is the sign of, people who are leading us, and thought leaders and people that inspire us, these inspiring leaders. Of course, that could be political figures. That's people like popes and other kinds of people that we respect and admire. This solar eclipse in Ardra is going to be groundbreaking and paradigm shifting, and could really blow apart a lot of false nonsense in our world. The next important shift happens November 4th, when Jupiter goes into Sagittarius finally. After dancing around back and forth, like I said, on that Jyeshta Mula Gandanta point for a couple months. Remember, March 13th to May 8th, Jupiter is back and forth in this Gandanta, and he goes back, and then he finally sets up in Sagittarius for the next year or so on November 4th. So November 4th, Jupiter goes into Sagittarius, and it's a very positive time because the ruler is in the house. So when the ruler is there, we can see some order get established. So in a general sense, 2019 is going to be very topsy-turvy and transformative, particularly for authority figures, those in power, those we believe are going to save us, these kind of savior figures that we've had before or that we see. And Jupiter going into Sagittarius is going to actually return some justice to the equation. Then the final eclipse of the year could be a real doozy, like that word doozy. This is December 26th. We have, again, this is the eclipse. It's happening at about 10 degrees of actually closer here, yeah. It's about 10 degrees. It's December. It'll be Christmas in the West, on Christmas Day in the West, and December 26th in the eastern part of the world. But it's in Mula Nakshatra. So this solar eclipse in Mula Nakshatra, you see Mercury is close by as well. So is Jupiter, Ketu, and Saturn. Look at all of these planets gathered around this solar eclipse in Mula Nakshatra. Jupiter, Sun, Moon, and Mercury all in Mula. And then Ketu in Purvashada and Saturn also in Purvashada. So, again, this is quite, again, transformative on a lot of levels. One of the main things to say, again, about these placements for 2019, there could be some major financial hurdles and pressure and difficulty that we have to contend with, and we can see perhaps some of that really starting to be painful or difficult perhaps around the end of the year. I definitely think that this, again, this is a very tough eclipse, which could show some real changes and uprooting of people and situations and exposure of deceit and shady figures really being destroyed and coming to the forefront and then disappearing. I think this last eclipse of 2019 could really show the way for a new cycle emerging, because Jupiter being there ultimately channels things toward a sense of purpose and hope, whereas the earlier part of the year, when Jupiter wasn't yet in Sagittarius, there's more of a possibility of darkness and confusion around things that are happening. This is still very uprooting and very destabilizing, but there will be a sense of direction, at least with Jupiter there. That's my feeling. Although, again, this is some pretty intense stuff. Underneath it all, one of the main things I think will be felt is the financial detriment and difficulty. So if you want to see how this is going to impact you, you can get a quick 30-minute reading, and I'll evaluate your chart based on the most important factors that I outlined here. Also, look for a more detailed, like 60-minute webinar that I'm doing on 2019.